Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, After the Mask 2021 Innovations for Selling and Business Growth in the New Normal, presented by the Florida SBDC at UCF. My name is Christopher Bogstad, and I'm an associate consultant at the Florida SBDC, and I'll be hosting the webinar today along with our presenter, John Finnegan. Before we get started, I'd like to give a brief overview of the SBDC. The SBDC, or Small Business Development Center at UCF, is an economic development organization that exists to help small businesses grow and succeed. We serve an 8-county region. We are state designated as Florida's principal provider of business assistance and are partially funded by the US SBA, State of Florida, and other local support organizations and community partners. The SBDC has been around for over 45 years, and we have offices throughout Florida, ranging from our headquarters in Pensacola all the way to the Keys, with each region being hosted by a university or state college. In Central Florida, we are hosted by UCF. Our service offerings include no-cost one-on-one consulting in all different areas of business, and normally in-person but now virtual seminars on various business topics and strategies. We'd also like to thank TD Bank for kindly sponsoring this webinar. Now, before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping rules. Your mics are muted by default, but if you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions chat box feature in the GoToWebinar panel at any time, and we'll address them towards the end of the presentation. And please don't use the raise hand feature. Again, just use the questions box. Copies of today's presentation can be found under the Handouts tab on the GoToWebinar panel. Evaluation surveys for this webinar will be emailed to you shortly after the session, so please check your inbox at the conclusion and submit your feedback as soon as you can so we can improve our future offerings. Now, before I pass it over to John, I would like to give a brief introduction of today's presenter. John Finnegan has been a business consultant with the SBDC at UCF for the past 2 years, starting as a volunteer advisor and moving into a full-time role in 2020. He's part of the consulting team working with small business clients in Central Florida. Prior to his SBDC role, John worked for 30+ years in the business world, typically in senior business development roles. He's worked in large, multi-billion-dollar Fortune 200 corporation and medium-sized 500 to 700 million businesses. He founded and managed 2 successful small businesses in Central Florida and has contributed business development and general management guidance to a number of others. His formal business education includes a BBA and an MBA from the University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. And with that, I'll turn it over to John.
What was that last thing you said, Christopher?
Go Badgers.
Go Badgers. Thank you, kind sir. So I was able to convince a young man from Norway to give some love to the University of Wisconsin Badgers. So my work here is done. I appreciate you joining us for this discussion of innovative looks to growing businesses. We actually started this conversation last year with Central Florida small businesses. And if you think of the type of business in Central Florida, many are related to the hospitality industry, tourism, business travel, that kind of thing. So last year when we were talking to clients, many of them, their businesses essentially had shut down and they were looking for new opportunities to restart the business that wasn't tied to tourism. And last year, these discussions were required. I mean, it was about survival. It wasn't simply about business growth. Well, this year, I think we're all comfortable with the fact that the economy is coming back very nicely. And my suspicion is we are going to, for the foreseeable future, be able to enjoy a robust economy. So now it's about small businesses leveraging the recovery. We're going to talk about, we've got kind of a couple of areas of discussion that we're going to talk about here. One is the ideas. So that's got to be the starting point. Is what ideas that you have for growing the business. We'll talk about a couple just symbolic. The second thing we'll talk about relatively briefly is the process. So how do you go through the process if as a business owner or a business executive, your intent is to grow the business beyond what you've done historically? So what is the process to do that? We'll talk through that. And then we're going to talk, and I'll bring this up a couple of times. It's the owner's attitude and the owner's approach, or the executive team's approach to growing the business. We're going to talk about that because it's absolutely critical. I'm going to bring up a couple of examples of big corporations. So we're going to talk about some, different approaches to use. I'll show some examples of how large corporations have kind of followed that path and have been successful about it. And that'll give us the perspective from a small business. Big businesses can do it. We should be able to do it too. All right, I'm just going to go through the agenda fairly quickly here. We'll look at some fundamental ideas for growth. I'm going to just touch on the state of Florida. It's a high growth state. Thinking outside the mask. So we're going to talk just briefly about the owner's attitude and mindset. We're going to talk about, small, mid-sized business owners, the business footprint, and we're going to look at owner expectations. And then we're going to kind of get into the core of the topics here, expanding the business footprint, looking at sales territory, look at product line, business networking, business growth team, and that kind of thing. And then it's a process. The whole, from start to finish, this is all a process, and then seek professional help. So this is really the starting point. And here's what I'm going to say. This is about the owner's willingness and interest and desire to grow the business beyond what they've done in the past. And we're going to talk a little bit about the footprint, what your historical footprint has been. But here is kind of the key from an owner's perspective or from a business executive's perspective is your attitude towards growth. And here's what I mean. If your default answer to any kind of discussion about should you do this, should you do that, if your default answer is no, if your default answer is we've tried it in the past, it didn't work in the past, it's too risky, I'm not interested in that. If that is kind of historically your default answer, this is going to be a tough conversation. And I think you got to be willing to recognize that as well. The state of Florida. So I think we're all aware, everybody on this discussion is aware of the robust nature of the state of Florida's business economy. You look at some of the figures there. And here is my perspective. My perspective is I grew up in Wisconsin. The first half of my business career was with organizations, with companies based out of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, between 2010 and 2020, Wisconsin grew by 2.4%, 2.4% over that decade. Florida in the same decade, between 2010 and 2020, grew 15.3%. So almost 7 times the growth rate Florida had as opposed to Wisconsin. And what I'm trying to do is set an expectation. This is a high growth state, one of the highest in terms of business economy, one of the highest in the nation. And we as business owners, we should be recognizing that. Okay. Thinking behind the mask, that's really the key. The key, if you're trying to grow the business, is to think differently. And as business owners, and I think most of the folks on here are either business owners or business executives, if you expect your organization to perform differently, you have to lead differently, and that's obviously the key. This way up, consider the counterintuitive. So a lot of what we're going to talk about, a variety of ideas for business growth. Some of them are, fairly common approaches to business growth, fairly safe and secure, maybe lower risk. They're kind of down the middle. Then we're going to talk a little bit farther out, a little bit more innovative thought, might be a little riskier, that kind of thing. And a couple of the ideas we're going to talk about are clearly counterintuitive. So we're going to talk a little bit about working with competitors. Okay, that's kind of not the first thing that comes to a business owner's mind when you're thinking about how are we going to grow in 2021. Reaching out to a competitor, probably not front of mind. So we are going to talk a little bit about that. Expand your footprint. So I want you to think about your business currently and in the recent past. It's finite. There's a definition to it. You have a certain finite product line. You have a finite number of people in your business. You're selling to a finite range of businesses, so it's pretty easily definable, and it's it's a recognizable footprint. And here's and I tried to come up with a way to visualize this concept. So if this is your historic footprint over the last couple of years, that's the way your business operated. And this is your thought for 2021. It looks the same. Frankly, it is the same. Okay, well, if you're going to do things the same in 2021, very likely your results are going to be fairly similar. So if your growth over the last couple of years has been 5% or 8%, I would expect as a business owner, if you're going to do things the same, you're going to get kind of the same results. If you want different results, you need to have a different footprint. You need to start looking at things a different way. So that's what we're going to talk about. So here is kind of the starting point. Hence the starting point for the race on the top is define performance expectations. And those business owners that work with me, they know that in the beginning, in the intro call, in our very first call, we talk about where are you trying to get to in 2021? Where are you trying to get to in a year? What's your expectation? So that's got to be the starting point. So, come up with a sales budget or a revenue budget for the year, and then look at it on a monthly, quarterly basis. So you got a sense of what the expectation is. And again, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but if your expectation, if historically you've grown by 5% or 8%, and now you're looking for 20% growth, okay, that's fair. That's a fair expectation for an owner, but fully realize that you got to do things differently to get there. And this is what it's going to be from the business owner's perspective: is you got to reconcile your comfort for risk with your expectation for growth. And I work with, and we work with, a broad range of business owners, broad range of personalities, broad range of business types, broad range of expectations, and some are content with kind of status quo growth, and some simply are not. So if you can kind of come to terms and recognize that the more aggressive your expectation for revenue growth and for the growth of your business, the more aggressive that expectation is, the more aggressive you have to be in terms of how you're going to expand your business. Okay, we're going to start simple. So this is kind of one of the most simple ways to expand your business, is to expand the territory. And I'm going to use an example here, Greater Orlando. And just to put things in perspective for the discussion, I put the population in there as 1.9 million. Okay, so if you're looking at an incremental expansion to maybe adding Daytona Beach, adding Lakeland, adding Melbourne, just for the perspective, population 265,000 in those areas. Now, at the top, you see it says simple. I'm not saying it's easy. But in terms of growing your business, kind of a incremental expansion of the territory is kind of as simple as it gets. It's relatively low risk, and here's why I tell you it's simple. You're selling the same product line, so you need the same expertise. You're probably doing it with the same management team, same facility, the same customer service staff, accounting, that kind of thing. So essentially, all you're doing is kind of expanding the geography. You're starting to look at more potential customers, and it's relatively low risk. Now you can look at that a little farther. Okay, maybe you're looking at expanding to a key market, and Tampa is kind of the adjacent key market for Central Florida. And again, for perspective, the population 3.1 million. So that's really a pretty good opportunity for you to grow your business. Now, the incremental expansion is a little bit more controlled. Moving into a key market, there's a little bit more involved to it. There's probably going to be more cost. There's certainly a little bit more risk. You may have to add a satellite location to be able to service the new accounts that you're going to bring on in Tampa. You might have to add even a satellite manager of some sort, maybe some support people, maybe a salesperson or a couple of salespeople. So, again, when you're looking at how do you expand the business, this is kind of, step one. Do you have the ability to expand the territory? And I used obviously this example, Central Florida expanding. The same could be said if your territory currently is Florida. You're selling kind of to customers in the state of Florida, and you want to be able to expand. Maybe you expand to Georgia, or maybe you expand to the Southeast. Obviously, that in this greater scope of things and the scale of things, scale of your business, that kind of expansion is a little bit more involved. There might be more expense, there might be more risk, that kind of thing. But it's just a matter of perspective. Okay, expand your product line. And I'm going to use an example here. So you're looking at your current product line and the potential to add complementary or adjacent products to your current product line. And the example I'm going to use is a seller or a distributor or a dealer of doors in the construction market. And maybe you're selling doors to general contractors and home builders. And maybe your thought for expansion is to add a product line of windows. So here's kind of the opportunity there. You're selling to the same people. You might have to add some. Obviously, you have to add relationships with other suppliers. So you're currently working with suppliers of doors. Now you have to start building relationships and reach out and get the attention of suppliers of windows as well. Another opportunity, same example, is to add service and installation. Maybe that's an opportunity for you to expand your footprint, your current footprint. And the example is the same. You're selling doors to general contractors or home builders. You deliver them to the job site. You leave it to the general contractor to do the install and service after the fact. Well, maybe the opportunity for your growth is to add the installation. So now instead of just dropping the equipment, the product off, now you're expanding, and now you're going to take on the responsibility for installation and potentially service downstream. Okay, so why do that? So there's the advantage from your perspective as a business owner to broaden the opportunity to make money. You're selling more to the same customer base essentially, and it gives you a broader range of opportunity. But the real benefit is, in my mind, is to your customer, because you think about a general contractor or home builder. If they're buying doors from you and that's all you're selling, they have to buy the windows from somebody else. So they have two relationships going for those products rather. So from a customer standpoint, from a general contractor, I can assure you that general contractors want to work with less vendors than more. So if they can buy doors from you and windows from you as one vendor as opposed to two vendors, that's a much preferable from a general contractor or a home builder perspective. Obviously, this is a very basic example I'm using, but you think about it from your company's perspective. Are there opportunities for you to add product lines that are adjacent product lines that are complementary, that you can expand your business, expand your footprint? It's good for you, it's good for your customer base. Hey, Christopher, any questions so far?
Not as of right now.
Okay, I have a tendency to speak fairly quickly, so sometimes it. Okay, I mentioned big corporations are all about product line expansion. That is the fact. And apparently there was this, back in the 90s, those of you who are old enough to remember the 90s, there was this quaint little a seller of books called Amazon Books. I'm not familiar with that company, but some of you might be. Well, apparently, as I've been told, Amazon at some point decided to expand their product line, and now apparently they're a fairly large corporation. Obviously, I'm kidding, but so at some point, Jeff Bezos and his team decided, they made a conscious decision that we're moving from being a seller, online seller of books. What else can we sell? How can we expand? And let me assure you, I understand this is the extreme example. This is obviously the extreme example, but we could list, dozens and hundreds of other businesses, of other, national businesses or global businesses, big corporations that have made a conscious decision to expand their product line and have been very successful at it. And my point is, if they can do it, why can't we do it with the smaller businesses? Why can't we do it? And if there's a discussion with small business owners that we have finite resources, I get that. I get we have finite resources. My suspicion is Amazon Books in the 90s had finite resources as well, but at some point they made the decision to expand their product line. Build cooperative partnerships. So there's a couple of ways. If you think about, and this is going to be a discussion of win-win. The first part, the first opportunity for you to expand using cooperative partnerships is with your suppliers. So your major suppliers, if you think about it this way, you both have a vested interest in growing the business. So if you're more successful, if you have the ability to sell more products that you're buying from them, it's good for you and it's good for them. So now how can you work with suppliers to be more competitive in your marketplace? And maybe it's anything, cooperative advertising, or maybe it's improved pricing structures, or anything like more convenient purchasing process, that kind of thing. Any way you can work with your suppliers and you're more competitive in the marketplace, good for you, good for them. And the same with your key customers, your key customer base. If you can make them more competitive, it's good for them, it's good for you. So here is, not everybody thinks that way. A lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of business executive teams are very content with the way they're doing business. So their footprint is staying the same. They're not thinking outside. They're not thinking outside the mass. So here's what I'm going to suggest to small business owners and executives that are listening: is you be proactive. If you have relationships with a number of your vendors, you make the call and you say, hey, we've been buying from you, for years. We're trying to grow our business. You're trying to grow yours. Let's talk about opportunities for you and us working together in our marketplace to make me more competitive, so we can win. That conversation you can have with your suppliers. You can also have that conversation with your key customers. And here's what I would. Not everybody's comfortable with that conversation. So start with the relationships that you have that are the strongest relationship, that you are the most comfortable with. I call them friendlies. Where you have a good relationship with one of your key suppliers. You call that person and you have that conversation. Say, hey, is there a way we can work together to improve our competitive nature in the marketplace? You start the conversation. Expand your business network. Okay, so the big companies, this is another example. Big companies are all about partnering with other big companies for mutual benefit. And when I was putting together the topics for this discussion, this advertisement was on TV. It was an advertisement for Chanel No. 5. And it was a beautiful advertisement. It was high fashion, very attractive, pretty colors, all that kind of thing. Very attractive commercial. At the end, it said Chanel No. 5, available at Macy's, the fragrance destination. And my first thought was, I didn't know Macy's was a fragrance destination. I thought that's where you went to buy clothes and stuff like that. Apparently, it's a fragrance destination. And the reality is, the people from Chanel or whoever their parent corporation is, the parent company, and the people from Macy's got together and somebody said, how can we work together? And this was the way. So they have this beautiful commercial. It's exposure for Chanel No. 5, and it's exposure for Macy's, and it shows them working together. And there was probably shared cost to develop the commercial, to air the commercial, that kind of thing. So if the large corporations can do it, why can't we do it at the small business level? All right. I think I missed a slide here. Okay, well, I'm going to talk about competition. What's up with them? So you should always, regardless of your industry or regardless of the market or regardless of the strength of the economy, you should always be aware and know what's up with your competitors. You should know their strengths and weaknesses. What are they doing? What are their product lines? What is their footprint? What is your footprint? That's always, that should be a requirement for you as a small business owner, because it allows you to understand, where do you have to be? So now the question is there an opportunity to reach out to one of your or some of your competitors and have a stronger position in the marketplace because of that relationship? And here's what I'm talking about. Say if you've identified a couple of key competitors, they have their strengths in the marketplace, they have their weaknesses in the marketplace. You have your strengths in the marketplace, you have your weaknesses in the marketplace. And is there an opportunity for you to work together somehow? And what that relationship looks like, it's up to you. It's up to you and the other business owner. And maybe it's a combined business. That's not necessarily what this discussion is about, but maybe there's the ability to work together somehow where you can maximize their strengths, maximize your strengths. It's better for both of you. And maybe there's some sharing of accounts or something like that. I will tell you, there is some risks to it. And I was asked in a previous presentation, is there a risk to them taking your customer base? I think that's at some point it's an instinctive view on your part. Do these people recognize that there's value to working together and it'll make both of you stronger in the marketplace? They have to recognize that, and there has to be some credibility there, some trust, some ability to trust them. So, this is kind of a counterintuitive approach to the discussion, but it's certainly one you should probably take a look at. And this isn't just me saying that. This was a recent issue of the Harvard Business Review, When to Work with Rivals. And that's exactly what that article is about, is kind of the counterintuitive nature of it, but when can you work together? And here's, this is kind of the real quick view. If you have a competitor that essentially looks just like their footprint, your footprint is the same, their strengths and your strengths are the same, there's not a whole lot of value to any kind of discussion about getting together. If they're different, their strengths are different, maybe they're dealing with a little bit of a different customer base or something like that than yours, that's when the opportunity is there. And one other thing I would say is make the call. If you look at some competitor and you think, wow, that'd be an interesting conversation, make the call. Just say, I'm John Finnegan, I'm with ABC Company. We're competitors, but why don't we talk? Let's have a conversation and let's see if there's any opportunity. Somehow I'm missing a slide here, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. And it's I call it strategic partnerships. And those clients who've worked with me know that I bring that up. And strategic partnerships is some business that is working in your industry, working in your space, but not necessarily a direct competitor. So, if they're in construction, you're selling doors and they're selling roof products or some other, construction products. You're in the same market, you're in the same business, you're selling to the same customer base. Is there an opportunity for you to partner with them and it'll make you both stronger? So think about it this way. You have there's people selling roofing products to general contractors. You're selling doors and windows. You have a conversation. You have a customer base, certain general contractors that you're selling to, and home builders, and maybe they have a parallel. Maybe there's a little bit of overlap, but they're selling to other people. Where you start working with them, you have a discussion, and maybe they introduce you to some of their general contractors that they're friendly with. You introduce them to so it's a warm introduction as opposed to a cold call, and there's some opportunity for you both to benefit from that kind of relationship. So think about strategic partnerships with other businesses in your space that aren't competitors, that maybe are adjacent. Okay, now we're going to look at a different approach, and that's expanding your business growth team. So in any business, you have people that are responsible for the business growth. Everything from small businesses, it's not terribly unusual, where the owner has responsibility for running the business and for growing the business. That's not terribly uncommon. But now, or there might be a small sales force. You might have one or two people that are responsible for outside sales, responsible for the growth. Is there any way to enhance that approach? And I'm thinking of a couple of different things. So maybe you have somebody in your business, they're doing something else, and maybe they would be good at sales. So you think about a customer service person. They are dealing regularly. That's their responsibility, is to deal with customers. Maybe they're very likable. They're very trustworthy. They have a good personality, outgoing personality. People like working with them. They know your business. They know the terminology. Maybe they have some opportunity, or you can take them and maybe help with the outbound sales calls, where they're starting to make calls and they're starting on prospects. And here's what I would tell you is start somewhere. So if you have a conversation with them and they're interested, you say, hey, you're working on customer service. What about 5 hours a week? So you set some parameters, you set some expectations. 5 hours a week, we have a list of other prospects out there, target prospects. Would you mind making calls to the decision maker and maybe get their attention? And they do the first part of the process. And then once they get somebody's attention, and once they get somebody that says, yeah, I'd be interested in talking to you, maybe they hand that off to one of your people that are historically good at that. They're the experts now. So they do the front end of the work. They get the people's attention. They do the activity. And once they get a hook, then you move them over and give them to somebody who can close the business. If that sounds interesting to you, and whether it's a customer service type person or your accounting person or anybody else, so think about it in terms of 5 hours a week. So set some expectations. Give them a process. This is maybe a little job description for what you want them to do. We want you to send emails. We want you to send maybe do some research and find out who the decision makers are. We want you to make calls. Make that intro call and try to gain information, that kind of thing. If that's what you want them to do. And then say, agree on something. You think you can help us for 5 hours a week? Okay, well, let's look at a specific times within that week where you're going to do it. So that's what you're going to do for, maybe, Tuesday morning or, Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon or something. For that period of time, that's what you're going to do. So you can go in that bubble and you can do that without interruption. That'll help them be more successful. Okay, expand your business growth. So use an outsourced inside sales firm. And it's kind of the same approach that we were talking about with your internal people, where this outsourced inside sales firm, they do the front end of the sales process. So they make calls, maybe they send emails, that kind of thing. And it gets you more exposure in the marketplace. It gets you more exposure to your prospects that are out there. And I put a real simple sales pipeline on here. prospects open, prospects active. So those are the people you've identified. Those are the people you're starting to reach out to. And then as soon as, so maybe they do the emails, maybe they make the calls. And as soon as they get a hook, as soon as they get somebody that says, yeah, I'm interested, we should talk, that's when they send it over. So it goes from them over to your team takes it from there, and your team closes it. So maybe that's an opportunity, and it's an incremental step. It's not hiring another full-time sales professional. You can do this in many cases. I've done some research. You can do it for something like $1,500 a month or something like that. So kind of it's an incremental step. Yeah, there's a cost to it, but it gives you the ability to kind of expand your presence. How to proceed? It's a process. It's a process. So that's Brad Pitt as Billy Bean. If you've seen the movie Moneyball, it's a great movie. But he talks about it's a process. It's a process. It's a process. That's one of the things that stuck with me when I watched the movie. And he was doing the same thing that that we're talking about here. Is he changed the footprint? He changed their process. He changed their approach to attracting talent and winning baseball games. And that's what we're doing here is we're talking about it. So the first step, obviously, is to identify ideas for growth. So some of the things we talked about, we just scraped the surface here in this discussion. But so start by identifying ideas that you can consider. And I always talk about friendlies. Who are people you have good relationships with? So it's your team, maybe your family, maybe friends of yours, other business owners, CEO groups, and here's what I would say about your team. So it's not you and your executive team or you and your sales team or people that are responsible for that. It's you and your whole team. I would try to get the group together, and I'm gonna tell you to think about it this way. Maybe you have people that are out in the field that are dealing with your customers, but they're service or install or something like that. But you have people out there, they deal with your customers person to person. And they have a different perspective. They have different perspectives. They see things differently than you might see things. They will have ideas that you might not have. Your customer service team, it's the same thing. They're dealing with your customers on a day-to-day basis. That's their responsibility. They see things that you might not see, and they'll have ideas that you may not have. So get the whole team together. And I put the whiteboard there. I'm a huge whiteboard fan because it helps you visualize what you're talking about. And you sit there with your group, and somebody comes up with an idea, you put it up there. And if you have 10 people in the room, you're going to get 10 different versions of that idea. How do you do it? How do you implement it? What's it going to cost? How many people? That kind of thing. And I can assure you, and I've been in brainstorming groups where there are 10 people, and the results are remarkable, as opposed to me trying to figure it out myself or me and one other person. The more ideas they are floating around, and my idea will spur somebody else's adjacent idea. How does that work? So identify the ideas. That's the starting point. Excuse me. Evaluate the ideas. And that's kind of putting together the plan. How does it work? And at some point, here's the perspective is, if you come up with 10 or 12 ideas that are kind of interesting ideas, at some point, you don't want to have to take all of the time to put together a business plan for each idea. So you have to, at some point, prioritize. So what are a couple ideas that look most attractive, that sound like it's the best fit? And then you plan it out. You put together a mini business plan for that one idea. How are you going to bring it in? What's the cost? Who are the vendors that you might have to work with? What is the expertise you might have to bring in? What is the staffing? What is the cost? That kind of thing. And do the math on it, and kind of figure out what's the risk, and is it worth doing? You select, you prioritize and select. And again, small businesses typically have finite resources. finite ability to fund new initiatives, finite bandwidth, finite management, kind of expertise and that kind of thing. So you can't bring on 10 new ideas. What are the top? What's the top? Maybe the top one idea. What's the top one or two ideas? And go ahead and then obviously move forward and implement. And the one suggestion I do is make somebody responsible for that. And I would almost encourage the business owner, maybe if you have a small management team, make one of your managers responsible for that new initiative. Now they have ownership. Now they have skin in the game, and they'll take it seriously. If you are the kind of the key person responsible for it, I mean, that's fine if that's the best fit, but the people will have a little bit less buy-in potentially. So give it to somebody, let them own it, let them jump into it, and let me assure you that they'll take it in most cases, they'll take it very seriously. Okay, we're getting kind of to the end here. This approach works, I can assure you. And again, we talked about at the beginning, it started about survival. It started about, we've lost our business. We've essentially lost our revenue stream. What else can we do to keep in business? Now it's about leveraging the recovery. We do have Central Florida small businesses that have taken up a broader approach. They've expanded their footprint, and it's been successful just in the last year or two. So it does work. It really does. And seek professional help. So we talked about going to your friendlies, but the Florida SBDC, we're here to help as well. If you've used us already, great. Continue to use us. If looking at new ideas for growing your business, if that's a priority for you, in many cases, if I'm brought into the discussion, that is the priority from an owner's perspective. But if you haven't thought about that, if you're on this discussion and you're not a client of ours, give it some thought. What should you do now? Move forward. So that's kind of it. Christopher, do we have anything for questions?
Yes, thank you, John. So we did have a few leftover questions, and if anyone else has any additional questions, please use the questions feature and give them now. The first question that we had was you briefly mentioned the process of evaluating the ideas. So the question is if you could expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to go back to that window scenario. Adding windows as an additional product line. So you go and I call it doing the math, but really it's expanding out. How does this work? What does it look like? So the first thing you do is identify potential vendors. So if you're adding a line, any kind of product line, who are the potential vendors? You start doing some research on the vendors. Maybe you start discussions if there are a couple of vendors that look like they would be a good fit for your business. You start that conversation. They'll give you some sense of, okay, this is what we require. If you're going to be a dealer or a distributor of our product, this is what we require. From your perspective, identify what kind of expertise do you know? Do you have it in-house? Will you have to hire somebody? So you put together kind of the mini business plan, and there's a couple of things. There's risk, obviously, but there's also cost, and it may impact as a business owner, it may impact your bottom line for a year or so because you're investing in expanding your business. But longer term, it's going to help you grow the top line, and it'll eventually help you grow the bottom line. So when I say do the math and put together a plan, maybe it's a 3-year financial projection where you're adding in that new source of revenue. You're adding in a little bit of the cost to it, and you'll look at what is the impact. So that's kind of the approach you use. And again, I wouldn't do that with too many because it's time consuming. I get it, but you got to sense that there's going to be a positive impact of the top line.
Great.
Just to clarify.
The second question that we had is you mentioned the word risk a couple of times in the presentation. Can you, what types of risk are you referring to is the question?
Yeah, so, you know, especially when there is more expense. So, you know, if the initiatives that you're talking about involve investment, and you know, we all pay attention to the media. We all hear that businesses have gone into, you know, especially at the national level or the global level, where they've gone into a new business, they've invested you know, multi-billions of dollars, and it wasn't successful, and they lost money. So even at the small business level, there is risk. There's risk, and I mentioned it earlier, to anything you do. So it's a matter of understanding what your investment is in this new initiative, or, you know, that thought process, and are you willing to risk losing the money? And that's obviously a decision that has to be made at the owner's level or at the executive level. So.
Okay, it looks like we have one question left, and I guess this is a little bit of a funny one. It is when I'm hitting my driver, I keep slicing the ball into the trees on the right. How can I fix that slice?
So somebody knows that I'm a golfer. I would say go on YouTube and get some lessons. Go to a pro, go to your PGA Pro and get some lessons. Funny, somebody's got a sense of humor. So that looks like it's it. Again, I absolutely appreciate your attention for this last 45 minutes or whatever it was. Give it some thought. If you're a business owner, if you're a business executive, give it some thought. If you do want somebody to talk to about this, reach out to the SBDC at UCF. We're happy to help. With that, I'll let you continue your day. Thanks again. Enjoy your day. Have a great day.
All right, thank you. And again, for all of you attending, please be on the lookout for that evaluation survey, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you all.